What's going on, everybody? It is TripleCrown24 JT back today with a new episode of the Sports Card Psychology Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me once again for today's episode. I'll be riding solo on this one. Periodically, you'll see me do a solo episode. Just sometimes the material doesn't necessarily line up with a guest that I think is extremely knowledgeable or passionate about it, or some of the guests I have in mind just we can't materialize a meeting time to sit down and record the show. I do appreciate the well wishes. As some of you know, I was a bit under weather this week. I still have some lingering effects. You can probably hear it a little bit in my voice today. So we'll be speaking a little bit softer. Maybe it's not as much energy as normal, but hopefully we'll be back to normal for next week's show. This is kind of a last minute production today. So I do apologize if the quality is not up to the standard that you would expect out of me, but we're going to roll with it and do our best. It's funny that I mentioned that because today's case study of backyard breaks really does relate to that energy idea that I talk about, and more specifically, a word that you probably don't hear too much in the hobby, and a word that is probably more relevant in the hobby in the last 2 years or so than it was ever before, and that would be charisma. And I'm going to dive into that in a moment, but I want to introduce kind of the subject of this video, which would be backyard breaks. Now, there has been a tsunami of hobby news, a lot of it that has been taken negatively over the past week. We could do an episode every day this week on all that has come out. I'm going to be focusing on this particular example, and I know that there's a lot of negative perception around this particular incident and this group of individuals. I'm going to do my best today to avoid that negativity, and I know that there are some out there who are probably hoping that I will just lay into these guys or bring out all my best jokes and memes. And there's a lot of that content out on social media already. Some of it is pretty funny, I will admit. But that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, and that's not really the point of today's discussion. Today's discussion really isn't even about what happened, more so looking at backyard breaks as a whole. And I say it that way because I don't want to say that what happened is not important or not relevant, because it is very clearly important and relevant. Otherwise, I wouldn't be devoting an episode to it today. We wouldn't be talking about it on social media. People wouldn't be in an uproar about this if it wasn't relevant. So that's why I'm not going to phrase it that way. It just doesn't necessarily align with where I want today's discussion to go. So I'm not here to make commentary on what happened. I'm not here to condemn, criticize, praise, defend, or anything of the like backyard breaks. The only thing I will say is that I do not agree with what they did. I do not agree with how they handled it initially. That is all I will say on that. To give you a brief synopsis of what we're talking about here, I'm sure most of you have been aware of what's going on with them. There's actually been quite a few YouTube videos put out by some pretty prominent channels discussing the matter as well. And unless you've been living under a hobby rock, and hopefully that rock wasn't located in the backyard. All right, I lied. There's one joke. That's the only joke I'll make, I'll promise. You probably know what's going on. So very briefly, Backyard Breaks is a group breaking service. They stream on Twitch. They stream on Whatnot. I believe they're on a couple of other platforms as well. And they do giveaways frequently, to my understanding. One of the giveaways that they did on January 14th was for a 2021 Panini Absolute Football Hobby Box. On the screen, I believe it was a screen capture or recording from Whatnot. I could be confusing it. If I am, I apologize. But it shown that a user by the name of GPEL10, I want to say it was, something along those lines, had won a giveaway for the hobby box. Now, whether or not this individual or this user actually won the giveaway, some people have debated. The overall consensus from a lot of those who have spoken about this is that that was the rightful winner of the giveaway. So that is why I'm going to refer to it that way, is that is the general consensus on the matter. They open up the box and there's a lot of excitement because they see it, there's a kaboom, and then it's revealed that it's a gold kaboom. And not only is it a gold kaboom, it is a Trevor Lawrence. And the kabooms, of course, I'm sure many of you know, are one of the most sought after kind of ultra rare inserts in the hobby right now. Panini has a lot of them out there. They pretty much have one, if not more than one, for every product. Some range in scarcity where there's a couple hundred of them made. Some may only be printed to 5 or 10 on the super low end. The kabooms, what the base versions, the print runs are, I'm not exactly sure. The golds, though, are interesting because they're actually one of the few inserts that have parallels to them. There is a green 1 of 1, and then the other one is, of course, the gold, which is out of 10. So we do know serial number to 10. We know exactly how many are out there. And Trevor Lawrence, of course, the kaboom checklist is fairly large. I think it's probably at least 50 subjects. So to hit one of the top rookies and then to hit a gold, astronomical odds for that to happen. And I don't follow the kaboom market very closely because a lot of times they're out of my price range. I especially don't follow the gold kaboom market because those are most certainly out of my price range. But the number that was kind of tagged on to this card right when it was pulled and the number that is circulated around in the past week has been $20,000, which is a pretty significant value for this card. How accurate that number is, I'm not sure, but that's what I'm going to roll with because that's also, again, been the general consensus. So the controversy from this event, of course, stems that Backyard Breaks does not end up giving it away to this GPEL user. Instead, there's this whole saga where instead they're keeping the card. They're going to sell the card and donate the proceeds to the local Boys and Girls Club. They're going to sell the card at anything above 20K. They're going to donate, so they would get the money from the card, but they'd be donating the 20K up front. They were going to then give the card away to someone else, and it does appear as of recording that they did give the card away to someone. It was not the original winner of the giveaway. It was a different user. That's just how I'm seeing it. I don't know if that's confirmed or not. They also did post a picture on their Twitter page. I don't know if it was posted anywhere else, with a picture of the letter that they received from the Boys and Girls Club, thanking them for their donation for the amount that they said that they would donate. And I thought that was interesting because a lot of the replies I saw was like, oh, that's fake. That's not a real letter. And I don't know if these guys could have posted any kind of proof because people were asking for proof of their donation. Or it wouldn't have been met with that scrutiny. It's just kind of what has happened with this situation. Now, what I found really interesting is the fallout of this, and just listening to a lot of the reaction, reading a lot of the reaction from people. And there's really two sides of it. The prominent side, and probably what you see more of, is the people bashing them, from their practices in terms of the giveaway to their appearance and everything in between. There are some who have defended their actions and called it a mistake. I went into a few of their streams in the days following this giveaway just to kind of observe and see how people would react to it. And it was very interesting. It was definitely entertaining, which I know is one of their goals, is to be entertaining. Well, their chat was definitely very entertaining. A lot of trolls in there. I've seen a few people post screenshots of them being banned for asking, oh, where's my gold kaboom? Oh, is this, if we hit this, am I actually going to receive it, or is it going to be donated to the Boys and Girls Club? Pretty much all the low-hanging fruit, kind of the trolling stuff, and it's a lot of the same jokes that I saw, just kind of worded different ways, or maybe they baited the host into answering a question, and then they hit him with the punchline. But then there was a lot of also people who were going after these trolls as well, which was very interesting to see them defending backyard breaks and kind of what their stance was. A lot of people saying that it was a mistake, or they fixed it by giving the card away or making the donation. Everything happens. Let's be for a reason. Let's be positive, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes they went a little bit more personal with the trolls, like, really, bro, you have nothing better to do, or you're just a hater. That's really been the big key word here. The people who have criticized backyard breaks, a lot of them being referred to as haters. I can't say that I've really heard the word haters used as much as it has been in the past week. Really, in the last decade, I kind of thought that was a late 2000s thing, having your haters and all that. But nonetheless, it's been an interesting fallout, to say the least. And watching a lot of the discussions and a lot of the people who are viewing this from an outside perspective, so not those who are on the platforms that they are, or who actively watch their streams or participate in their breaks, just the people who maybe didn't even know who they were before this incident. A lot of the questions I hear is like, why would anyone give these guys their money? Why would anyone give these guys their money now after what happened? Why do these guys dress this way? Why do these guys act this way? A lot of just why questions. And as you know, if you've watched the previous episodes, we love to tackle those why questions. And it relates back to the word they introduced at the beginning of this show, and that would be charisma. And Backyard Breaks exudes charisma in their host. And it's one of the reasons that so many people engage with their product and service. In addition to that, we can learn from this specific case study why we may engage with certain figures or companies or groups in the hobby because of how attractive charisma is. Now, by attractive, I don't mean, good looking type of attractive. I mean, in a sense of, it draws interest in, it draws eyeballs to your product or service, your social media channels, whatever the case may be, whatever you're trying to promote. That's what I'm talking about with attractiveness. So let's really take a look at charisma and what kind of makes up charisma. So it's typically something that's associated with extroversion. So being an extrovert rather than an introvert. Personally, as an introvert myself, I am the opposite of the subject of this video. I do not exude charisma. I'm kind of more mellow, quiet, more of an observer, listener type than someone who is wants to go out and speak. I say that as I record this podcast where I speak for 45 minutes straight. But charisma a lot of times is associated with that. A lot of it has to do with confidence, having a voice that exudes passion that people can relate to. People can really latch onto this emotional feeling that you're putting out there. And a lot of times that is coupled with optimism. People generally like happy people. People don't generally like miserable people, people who are always negative, people who have a pessimistic, glass half empty mindset. Now, everyone does have those moments, of course, but a lot of these group breakers, channels, social media accounts that you see that have really sprung up in the last 2 years or so, a lot of them have this in common where they really exemplify charisma. The exuberance behind them is really top tier. Their confidence in what they say, they can really communicate with effectiveness, enthusiasm, and assertiveness. And a lot of that does apply to someone like Backyard Breaks. And I think that's where a lot of the appeal comes from. Now, you personally, as the listener, may be sitting there saying, I still don't get it. And hey, that is perfectly fine. But there is clearly a segment of the hobby that does. Because, as I said, I went in and I watched some of their streams. I kind of did a little bit of homework leading up to this episode to see a bit of their growth, and people are still going business as normal with them. A lot of people spending a lot of money, a lot of people defending them on social media and saying that they really like these guys. And a lot of times I see that they say that they like the people, not so much the service that they are providing, which I think speaks a lot to who they are and why they stand out so much as well. And think about this too. There are so many group breakers out there right now. Back in 2011, when I joined my first ever group break, it wasn't like that. There was maybe a few dozen of them out there across all the platforms. There was a few really prominent ones. You probably know exactly who I'm talking about. A lot of them are still around to this day. Some of them have come and gone, but now there's been a huge explosion, and I see a lot more retail breaks as well. And since retail is a little bit easier to access than hobby, considering that you don't necessarily need to have a distributor to have access to retail or have retail in quantity, you just need to get it somewhere on the secondary market or from your local store, at least before restrictions were put into place or just completely shutting off the retail scene in certain stores like we saw in parts of 2021. So the barrier for entry to get into being a group breaker is very low. You need product. You need people who are willing to put their money in to break the product. And you need a camera with internet service to a platform where you can show you opening the boxes up. That is pretty much it. Now you can say, well, you need supplies to ship this stuff out. You need to have sturdy, high-speed internet connection so it doesn't lag. You need to have a top-facing camera too. All of those things are great. And some of the best breakers out there, your kind of poster child breakers out there, have all those aspects. That's why they have been so successful and built the reputation and brand that they have over the years. But really, a lot of the casual breakers out there, that's all you really need, what I just said there, as the essentials to really start a group breaking service or operation. Getting people to fill your breaks can be challenging at first. Sometimes you may need to take a loss. I have tried to fill group breaks of my own before, and it's failed miserably more often than it has succeeded. And also, I'm not someone who was really committed to it full time. I never went all in. I didn't necessarily have the products that people were chasing after too. And there's a whole different reason for that. We can get into all that in a separate conversation. But looking at this today, given the number of breakers out there, as I said, and how easy it is to start, you really need to do something to stand out. Can you have the lowest prices? Well, that's difficult to do because a lot of the big time breakers have large allocations or they are paying lower unit cost. And because of that, they can kind of pass on the savings to their customers. So unless you're willing to really take a significant loss or you happen to walk into some product by luck, which the latter option really isn't sustainable, neither is the first one. That one's just doesn't make any sense from a business standpoint to constantly take losses, especially heavy losses. You will not be able to compete with prices. That's the bottom line, especially when you factor in the shipping costs, the supplies that you need, all the little things that do add up, the more and more breaks that you do fill. So you need to have all that. And you need to be able to differentiate yourself. Now, some way that people will do that is a gimmick. You know, if I can't have the lowest prices, well, I'll do something that is entertaining, that gets people excited. And backyard breaks, they certainly have a brand that is distinguishable. Right now, it's got a brand identity of the guys who pulled off the scandal with the Trevor Lawrence KABOOM, which is not really the brand identity that you want to have. But the backyard breaks thing, they have the green screen in the background of their breaking setup where it's kind of got, you know, the backyard feel. It feels like just a bunch of dudes hanging out, having fun, opening up packs. And the reason I think that this is so successful is because it is so incredibly relatable. The casualness of it, you know, it's some people really do value, you know, group breakers who are going to be very serious and take really good care of their cards. And I'm not saying that Backyard Breaks doesn't do that. Again, I haven't watched enough of their content to really make a appropriate comment on how they handle things. Anything that I say would just be an assumption based off of my own biases and what I have seen from a very small sample size. So I'm not saying that when I go into that, but there are breakers where that's their thing, is that they're gonna get the packages out to you the very next day. They're gonna package it well. They're gonna take good care of your cards so you get them in the best condition as possible. And they might throw you a couple extras if maybe you don't hit so well, or they'll take a few bucks off your next spot, something along those lines. Um, Whereas these guys, one of the big appeals with it is that they're going to do that, but it feels more laid back. You know, these are guys who are just kind of we're hanging with the bros, so to speak. It might sound weird for me to say that, but it's true, and that is what really puts their charisma on a different scale. Uh, the reason that people really gravitate towards those who are charismatic is because a lot of times you can really establish a connection with these people. They are seen as empathetic figures in some cases, where they're you point at them and you say, this guy gets it, or this gal gets it. They get it. And what is it? Well, they understand the common person. What is the average break joiner or break participant in this case? What are they trying to get out of this break? And there are a lot of people who they get off of work, they come home, they want to see some cards get opened, they want to pick up their favorite team, or the team that has their favorite player, or the player that they are really high on right now, and they want to pick up some of their cards. So they go and they join a break. And yes, there is real money involved. And when I say real money, I mean real money based on some of the prices on some of the products that have come out. A lot of the basketball products in particular, some of the prices are just crazy. But it's still largely for fun, right? We do the whole hobby. One of the biggest points of it is to have fun. In fact, if you're not having fun, then that might be a sign that you need to really look within and have some introspection. But again, another discussion for another time. It's a fun, casual environment that they have built in there. From what I have seen, they're willing to make jokes, and they played off some of the jokes as well. One of the hosts that I saw, he was actually kind of just taking the lumps of people who were trolling, so to speak, or calling them out for the Trevor Lawrence incident. They kind of just, not really giving it back to him, but just playing into it. So that really, again, goes like, hey, we're in on the joke too. Like, yeah, this happened. That was a funny comment that you made. And that relatability is very attractive. And I think one thing in today's world that we've seen, and this ties into larger societal shifts that we've seen as well, is people want to be valued as an individual more than ever before. If we want to go back in history to maybe the Industrial Revolution, where we see people moving out of these skill-based single-person jobs and moving into these factories where they're part of this larger organization, and then that evolves into the modern company where you're part of this larger corporation or business or organization, whatever you may want to label this entity as. But you're seen as more as just a piece of a well-oiled machine, where if you break off, if you're not performing as well as they think you could be, then you are easily replaceable. And I think you see that a lot with how high the unemployment rate is right now, how many people value themselves more than what a lot of the wages being offered to them are, valuing their skill set, their time, their labor, and their efforts to help the owner of the company grow said company or sustain the growth that they've already had. And what does all that have to do with breaking? Well, again, it related back to the individual. These guys reply to the comments. You don't have to be a Twitch member, although there was a time where they did do a subscriber only chat earlier in the week that I had seen on their Twitch, where you had to purchase a Twitch Prime subscription to be able to chat in there. I think that was to combat some of the trolling. I don't know if that has changed in the recent streams again. Didn't do all of my homework for this episode. I apologize for that. But generally speaking, and prior to this incident, you didn't have to pay to participate in their chat. And they wouldn't just ignore you. You know, it wasn't just give us your money, let's break the cards, and let's get them out. And some people want that. That's what some people want. They don't want any funny business. They don't care if you have any personality or anything. They just want to get their cards as safe and fast as possible. That's it. But when you interact with people and you converse with them and you take an interest in them, that's where that charisma and that attractiveness really starts to stand out even more so. It leaves a positive impression. You see these guys a lot. They're freaking out. They have these over-the-top reactions. But overall, they're positive reactions. You know, they're not scowling or making angry faces. They're smiling. And a lot of times in a lot of the thumbnails too, you see excitement and smiling. And a lot of the thumbnails that sometimes people make fun of on some of the newer channels that have been put up on places like YouTube and the such, a lot of times you'll see people smiling or making some face that has an over-the-top reaction because people like to see people happy. People like to see people excited. That's why those videos get clicked on so much, is because there is an anticipation that builds that, oh boy, something big is going to happen, something big and exciting. And they want to go in and watch that or listen to it if it's a different platform that doesn't necessarily use video. My point is that these people with charisma attract an audience. And although their style may not align with what you really like, it is why Backyard Breaks built up the brand that they did and why they still have a lot of people following them now. So let's dive more into this, because I think a lot of the conversation at this point has shifted to, all right, this is kind of, I don't want to say it's in the past completely, because I don't think that this Trevor Lawrence thing is finished by any means. It's something that's going to be brought up for a very, very long time. But a lot of it now boils down to what is the aftermath and really understanding why are people still going back, knowing what happened. And to that, we kind of turn to an extension of charisma and going into charismatic leadership. Now, what I'm going to discuss here, these concepts and charismatic leadership, or if you want to take it even a step beyond that and say a cult of personality, not the Living Color song, but the actual sociology term that was really popularized during the beginning of the Cold War, referring to certain Soviet leaders, may sound ridiculous when you're comparing it to a bunch of guys in their 20s opening up boxes of sports cards for people. And I 100% agree with you. It is ridiculous to make those comparisons and say that the two are alike. Why I am using this and why I'm not going into a cult of personality, I'm talking about more so charismatic leadership, is because there are a lot of the same principles that do apply. Now, charismatic leadership, a lot of times we're talking about this in terms of people who actually have authority over us. And what's unique about this situation is that joining group breaks is not an authoritative position where we are forced into it. So say that you go work for a new company. You have a boss, and likely they have a boss, and they have a boss, and et cetera, et cetera. So those are the authority figures. Those are the leaders who, that's the structural integrity of your business. Those are the people who have jurisdiction over you, who can tell you what to do, who can really control how things play out and how your experience goes to some extent. In the United States, I live in the state of Ohio. There is a mayor over the city that I live in who's an authority figure. We have a governor who's Mike DeWine. We have a president, that's Joe Biden. So all of these people are also these authoritarian figures. And because I live in the area that I do within this jurisdiction, those are the people who have authority over me. Now, Within group braking, it's different because it's more so of a free will thing. And you could say, well, Triple Crown, you don't need to live in the United States. Okay, that's fine. But no matter where I go, as long as it's not complete anarchy, there is going to be some sort of authoritarian presence. Even in my own business, even though I'm the one who owns the business, I have to answer to a landlord for the office space I rent. I have to, I listen to the higher ups at eBay or PSA or any of these companies that I frequently engage with their products or services. They are somewhat of an authoritarian over me because they have control over an account that I use through their service. With the group breakers, you're making the choice to join their breaks. And at that time, when you make the choice to engage with their breaks and you pay this admission, so you cross the threshold to become a participant, that's when they have authority over you because they can dictate how the break goes. They could essentially say, screw you, I'm keeping your money and I'm taking all the cards. Now, that wouldn't go over very well. You'd probably get chargebacks and claims of fraud and a lot of really bad publicity that would stem from this and ultimately do in your breaking operation. So that is where I can somewhat draw this comparison with the idea of authority and charismatic leadership. So it works extremely well when someone is good at communication, when they are relatable. And that's all that we talked about before. These people are very good at motivating and rallying the troops. That's why backyard breaks, from what I did see in my observations, were able to fill breaks so well and at prices that were above what some of the other breakers that I have followed watching in comparison were able to get for similar products. They have built a sense of community. I think that's a very important part of this charismatic leadership, that the people who join their breaks, they're all part of the family. I hear that a lot. They call them bro or fam, these terms of endearment that makes you feel like you're part of the group. It also makes you feel like, you're one of the cool guys. You're just one of the dudes hanging out, opening up some boxes with your pals and getting some cool cards. It really plays into their brand so well. Now, where this fails is because a lot of this is ego-driven, this type of leadership, that a lot of times it may come off as disingenuous. Their gimmick is something that is seen through from outside observers who may just not be into it. And I think you're seeing a lot of that in fallout to the Trevor Lawrence incident. A lot of times this type of leadership can become self-serving. Very much so in this case with the Trevor Lawrence Gold KABOOM, where the initial decision to then keep the card, that's very self-serving because all of a sudden these guys have this $20,000 card, or if they sell it, that's $20,000. That is a lot of money. Unless you are at the very, very, very top of the 1%, $20,000 is a significant amount of money. And when these types of things start to manifest themselves, that's where the charismatic leadership really starts to fall apart. Again, it really depends on the beholder. Perspective is a huge, huge part of charisma, because if your personality doesn't necessarily mesh very well, you're not going to be able to extend this type of leadership, especially if this is primarily what you're leaning on. Again, this isn't, backyard breaks. I wouldn't say, I'm not going to recommend them to a friend. Well, I'm probably not going to recommend them, to a friend in general right now. But I'm not going to recommend them to a friend because you're getting, a really professional, well-produced show with the breaks where they handle the cards with just the most pristine of care and they get it out to you super quick. Some of those traits may apply, but what is more so the selling point that I would give? Oh, they're a fun group of guys. We go in and they're on every single day. They have so many different types of products and they're fun to hang out with, and it's fun to talk with the chat and all that stuff too. that's probably what I'm going to use as my sales pitch to talk about it. And that's just not for some people. And from the reactions that I've seen, it's really not for a lot of people out there. But there is definitely, based on the fact that they're still going and they're filling breaks at the rate that they are for the prices they are, there is a segment of the hobby that it really does resonate with. So really, I guess what can we take away from this? In terms of the future of backyard breaks, will this be forgotten? Will this be forgiven? I don't think people will forget about this. The Trevor Lawrence KABOOM, just because of, I guess, the characters involved in this, is going to be a running joke or a meme for a very long time. If you want more evidence of that, go back to one of the more infamous group break scandals with the Panini Honors box and the Brandon Cooks to 99. I'm sure many of you who were around back in the day remember the D&T break scam, where there was a card that was swapped out. Very, very poorly done. Go watch the video. It's only 2 minutes long, and it is just, it's bewildering the first time you watch it because it is so bad and so blatant that you just really wouldn't expect someone to do that on camera, but they do it. And now whenever a Brandon Cooks to 99 comes out, I see posts on it on social media. I watch other breaks where breakers will jokingly say, "Oh, Brandon Cooks to 99" when they're showing off the card, and then they'll just keep repeating it because that's, again, a callback to that video. So given that one and how this one is even a bit more high profile because of the platforms that happen on D&T breaks, if I remember correctly, was a Facebook group breaker, which there's a lot of them out there, and they're usually not the largest communities. There are some fairly big ones out there, but this one is definitely a lot more of a mainstream, or at least it has gone more mainstream in the hobby community, where this will not go away. I don't know when the next time you'll see a backyard breaks post of any kind where there's not someone in the comments, as long as they're not filtered out or deleted, or they don't make a reference to this event. This is something that will stick with them probably until the end of their breaking operation, whenever that may happen. I know a lot of people here probably listening have never broken with backyard breaks and probably are not going to. Maybe group breaks just aren't really your thing in general. So what can you really take away from this, or what can you really think about? Well, if you want to look at some of the larger figures in the hobby and kind of understand why people are gravitated towards them, especially some of your more casual collectors out there, why they gravitate towards certain figures, influencers, really look at their personalities and see if they pass the litmus tests for charisma. Are they relatable? Are they optimistic? Smiling, showing positive body language? Are they extroverted? In a lot of cases they are, but not all the time. There is one example I will say. There's a pretty prominent YouTuber who is focused around sports card content who I met in person. And again, one meeting, one time. I don't know what was going on in their personal life at that time, or maybe they woke up when they were a little under the weather that day. Maybe they just got some bad news or whatever. I'm not going to judge them or make conclusions over one individual encounter about an individual, but they were a lot different than what they were on camera. Much more mellow, down to earth, really relaxed, really cool person. And I greatly enjoyed our conversation. It wasn't a long one. We didn't really go into depth about anything, but it was a pleasant interaction. It was, this was a cool dude. This is someone that I would grab a drink with. But that's not necessarily what was portrayed on camera with them. It's very interesting with that too. So although extroversion may not be a huge in terms of in terms of charisma, it may not be a huge factor in it in terms of it being a necessity, whereas relatability is more of a necessity, in my opinion. Extroversion certainly can play a part of it, or at least you can fake being an extrovert. Kind of wrapping this up here. Again, really consider that. And I think that will give you a better understanding of why people may gravitate towards an individual or a group where you just don't get it. And what I think can really, really be taken away from this too is look at how you engage with some of the own figures. Who do you look up to in the hobby? And kind of understanding, how does their charisma or lack thereof, if you're talking about me, I'm just kidding. But also kind of not kidding. I'm not the most charismatic person. Anyways, I said no more jokes. I'll not make any more jokes. If you really take a deep dive at that, I think that you can really look into what you really admire in people in the hobby, and it will help you find voices that you can trust, voices that you can rely on to get a honest, fair, accurate opinion rather than a show or entertainment. Not that the two can't go together. And I think some of the most successful, well-respected content producers can generally combine the two in a very healthy balance. But knowing charisma when it's genuine and knowing charisma when it's not genuine and it's more so an act, I think is critical. It will really help push you over the top in terms of your understanding. So that will do it for me today on today's episode. Hopefully that made sense at the end. I know I kind of went off at a tangent there on the end and kind of tried to leave it a little bit open for interpretation. But if you're watching this on the YouTube side of things, would really like to hear from you. I'm pretty sure I know what the reaction is at this point to the backyard break situation. And if you want to give me your opinion on that too, I'm certainly not going to say no. I'd love to hear what your thoughts were. But to continue the discussion today, I really want to really focus in on that point of charisma and who are some other hobby influencers, personalities, figureheads, kind of, or entities, groups, people behind the scenes who exude this charisma. That would be an interesting case study. Maybe someone that you'd want to see covered in a future episode, similar to this one, if you enjoyed today's episode. Again, like I said, I'm kind of not playing with a full deck today. Hopefully you did enjoy this show. I should be back to something that's a little bit more regular, I guess what you can consider regular at this point in the series. But until next time, thank you so much for listening. Take care, stay safe, be kind.